I was born of man's ancient desire to manage information, no matter how simple or complicated. Over the centuries, I have taken many forms, and I will take many more. I am the computer. Early on, man learned he needed ways to keep track of what he accumulated, to keep a simple record of the animals he hunted, the fish he caught. At first, he used his fingers. Then pebbles were made to symbolize numbers. As the world became more complex, pebbles turned into beads on a string. Some 2,500 years ago, the abacus was invented. It became quite popular in the Orient, and the skill of counting on it was passed from generation to generation. In France, in 1801, Jean Jacquard created a loom that employed punched cards to form different weave patterns. Each card stored information about its particular pattern, and the information was used to guide the loom. Jacquard had discovered how to program a machine. During World War II, the Germans issued orders on a cipher machine called Enigma. By shifting the drums inside the machine, the Nazis could create an almost unlimited number of codes. To break those codes, the British developed Colossus. It performed the same numerical computations as its German counterpart and was one of the world's first digital electronic computers.
What you're looking at is a computer-generated plot of a silicon chip. The real-life size of this chip, from the bottom to the top or from the left clear over to the right, is less than 1/4 of an inch. It's smaller than your little fingernail.
What makes all this possible today? Little more than a remarkable piece of technology smaller than a fingertip. Called a microchip, it is the brain of the modern computer. Dr. Carver Mead of California Institute of Technology explains.
We didn't always have a technology as beautiful as this one to design computers. We used to make computers out of much more crude electronic devices. The early ones were made out of vacuum tubes. Vacuum tube wasn't always this clumsy, but the early computers used vacuum tubes like this one. The vacuum tubes were the most power-consuming and the most unreliable of all the computing elements. In the late 40s, the transistor was invented. This is a circuit element and is made from transistors. Each of these little metal cans is a transistor, one transistor. The chip behind me would fit nicely within one of these little metal cans, and it has 30,000 transistors on it. So you can see the enormous improvement in speed and power consumption and size of computers that has happened in the last 10 or 15 years.
The microchip is so complex that it must be designed by computers. Thousands of transistors are crammed onto an incredibly small space. Visualized here at the points where the lines of different colors intersect, transistors are little more than on-off switches that either pass or stop electrical impulses. These impulses are coded to represent the only two numbers a computer can work with, 1 and 0. by arranging them into various orders and sending them through the chip's complex patterns of circuitry. The ones and zeros are used to symbolize a great variety of words or numbers.
After the design of an integrated circuit, the circuit designer needs to verify that his circuitry will indeed function the way it was simulated on the computer.
Dick Peshley of Intel Corporation talks about how photographic enlargements of the chip are used to verify that all its circuits are present. Since a chip is made up of several layers, each layer must be checked out.
There are typically about 12 layers. These layers are inspected one by one, and then we stack them. This stacking process allows us to verify not only that each individual circuit element is there, but that it's aligned correctly and that the transistors will indeed function like they were simulated.
Once verification is complete, the process of chip manufacturing begins. It begins with silicon, after oxygen, the most common element on Earth. Refined from quartz rocks, silicon holds properties that can be altered to create the transistors that make up the chip. Transistors which control and amplify electrical signals, a computer's lifeblood. Melted under tremendous heat, silicon is then grown into long crystals. From those crystals, thin wafers are sliced. And on those wafers, chips with elaborate circuitry are fabricated. In an environment far more sterile than that of an operating room, the complex process of chip manufacturing is played out. In the Middle Ages, alchemists sought to convert common metals into gold. These are the alchemists of our time, turning silicon into the remarkable computer chip which has given birth to a worldwide, intensely competitive industry. The computer chip that has been called, with good reason, modern gold. Today, computers have found their way into all facets of life, and athletics at their highest levels are just one. Here, pressure-sensitive plates set into the pedal of a bicycle send information about how and where the rider is applying force to a computer which will analyze that data. Dr. Peter Cavanaugh of Pennsylvania State University talks about how computers can help riders be more proficient.
The crucial thing here is not how much force an athlete can apply, but whether they can apply that force in a manner that's appropriately directed so that they are effective in the application of their force to the pedal. Our strategy to date has been to make these measurements and then to sit down at a briefing conference with the athletes, with the coaches, and say to them, now, this is a graphic representation of the way you're applying force to the pedal. We believe that there are certain times in the cycle when you should be doing something different, and we would like you during your training to think about applying force differently.
Of course, the question is whether or not the human body can actually do the things a computer prescribes. Even if it cannot, much can be learned from the computer's ability to process the millions of bits of information that make up a motion as simple as pressing down on a bicycle pedal. The computer tape storage room at the United States Bureau of the Census. Here, data on the American population is kept. The need to store and manage enormous amounts of information is nowhere more evident. The first census was held in America almost 200 years ago. In 1790, there were 5 questions asked of 4 million people. Those 5 questions produced 20 million bits of information. 100 years later, this punch card, a mechanical tabulating machine invented by Herman Hollerith, was used to speed up the sorting of the 1890 census. Then, 30 questions were asked of 63 million people. That produced 1,890,000,000 bits of information. Herman Hollerith had been a Census Bureau employee. His invention was so successful that he used it as a basis for a company he started, a company now known as IBM. That was 1890. Willie Clark of the U.S. Census Bureau brings us up to date.
During the 1980 census, there were approximately 130 questions asked of over 226 million people. This equated to something near 8 billion pieces of data. So you can see the necessity of today's high-speed processing units. These computers are capable of retrieving data in less than a second.
This is the Cray 1 computer, one of the world's most powerful, capable of performing 100 million operations per second. It was used by Digital Productions of Los Angeles to create with extreme realism and without pen and ink this animated rendition of the Devo Hat. John Whitney, president of Digital Productions, reflects on how computers affect motion picture production.
There remains on the shelves of Hollywood thousands of scripts which cannot be produced because of the budget. Those budgets are so high that the picture cannot be created, cannot be produced with traditional methods. And so what we're seeing is that new techniques utilizing advanced digital scene simulation are breaking cost barriers. They're making it possible to produce a picture more quickly.
Lucasfilms and Paramount Pictures used computers to control the motion of animated spaceships in the film Star Trek II and create the background star fields through which those spaceships appeared to pass.
The pipe began to rust while new. The pipe began to rust while new.
The word pipe is being
began
digitally
to rust
encoded
while
by a
new.
computer and sent directly to this deaf man's brain. Dr. Robert White of Stanford University talks about the development of an artificial implantable ear.
You can think of your ear as a converter, whose job it is to convert the mechanical energy of an incoming sound wave into a stream of electrical impulses going up the auditory nerve. In principle, it's possible to bypass a defective ear and insert those electrical signals directly into the auditory nerve and trick the brain into thinking the ear is working. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. This unit here is a microcomputer in itself. We have logic chips and such to decode the incoming signal. The units on it are so small they cannot be really seen very much with the naked eye. This device is implanted in the mastoid cavity behind the ear. And then there's an external unit which takes sound, analyzes it, and correctly encodes it into the stream of electrical impulses.
We take a simple word like pipe for granted, but that word is an accumulation of many frequencies. Computers analyze some of those frequencies, the obvious peaks and valleys. Then they digitize them, encode them, and send them directly to the brain. This kind of technology remains in its embryonic stages, but it does offer hope to the profoundly deaf. In this odd-looking structure on the other side of Stanford's campus, a new breed of composer is at work. Chris Chafe uses the computer to make music.
This is a Mozart piano sonata, just the melody line. You can hear how the trills sound very human, performed. The hope is that we can take certain processes like this, which are musically intelligent, and start expanding on them, and eventually come up with an accompanist or a computer which knows something about music and aids the composer in a much more intelligent way.
John Chowning is the director of Stanford Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics.
I'd like to present an example now that shows how by a small manipulation of sound we can make something that sounds quite unreal become something quite real. In this case, the voice of a female singer. We first hear just a pure tone. Following that, we hear the addition of a number of harmonics or other parts of the tone which make it complex. But we'll notice that it doesn't sound human-like until that moment where we introduce a little bit of periodic and random vibrato. And now it sounds like a sung vocal tone.
I'd like to play an excerpt of my most recent piece, Silicon Valley Breakdown.
To ears unused to it, the music computers produce may sound strange, even stranger when juxtaposed with truly classical forms. Here, David Jaffe's Silicon Valley Breakdown is heard in vivid contrast to Winter from Vivaldi's Four Seasons.
It might be possible that eventually there'll be a performer on stage playing next to a computer. The computer listens to the performer and accompanies in a way which a composer might have prescribed. The aircraft carrier you have just seen does not exist. What does exist is this flight simulator, which is instrumental in the training of helicopter pilots. Using up to 6 screens to project incredibly lifelike computer-generated images, this $12 million device is programmed to respond to every pilot's decision. Once inside the simulator, a trainee cannot distinguish simulation from reality. The movement, the wraparound field of view, the perfect reproduction of the helicopter interiors and the noise of the engine all serve to provide trainees valuable and safe experience without their ever having to leave the ground. But as expensive and complex as the simulator is, it, like all machines run by computers, remains simply a tool.
Basically, we've tended to think that robots are magic boxes with arms, and really they're nothing more than a tool, nothing more than a piece of automation that's programmable or that we can teach to do a specific job and change it to do another job very easily.
The computer is, in many ways, like a telephone in that it is a tool that office workers can use to get their job done, either more effectively or more efficiently.
We're training people now to use the computer to do their work. It's another tool, just like a stethoscope or just like a thermometer.
By pressing a few buttons, I can locate a patient. I can find out what his physician has requested, and I can find out what one of my colleagues has said about that particular patient's test. Previously, this required an awful lot of people running around doing an awful lot of legwork.
In industry, in medicine, in the office, and in a host of fields, computers are helping with a variety of jobs. At this truck plant, they assist in painting, welding, and other assembly line functions. Peter Walser of the Nissan Motor Manufacturing Corporation discusses the effects of computers on the job market.
The type of job that's being eliminated is the highly repetitive, physically exhausting job. Dangerous job, dirty jobs, boring jobs. Something which a piece of equipment can consistently repeat time after time. The job being created is the maintaining of this sophisticated equipment.
In matters of life and death at hospitals across the country, computers are used to monitor the vital signs of critically ill patients. And the nurses who must work with those computers have had little difficulty learning to do so, as Wanda Baraska explains.
It takes, on the average, of 9 to 12 hours to teach a nurse to be proficient. We have never had a person who has not been able to learn to use it. It makes learning fun.
Computer-controlled equipment enables doctors to break new ground, and it provides them with a constant flow of significant information. Dr. Louis Weiner of Greater Southeast Community Hospital speaks of the changes brought about by computers in the medical field.
The amount of information that a physician is required to know is so much greater than what was required 20 years ago that there's no way that any one person can keep all of these facts immediately in front of them at all times for immediate retrieval without the use of a computer. By freeing me from clerical responsibilities, the computer allows me to do what I was trained to do, and that's take care of patients.
One last item, Brunel. Did you get the electronic voice message I sent you before I left Washington last night?
Computers have also altered the modern office. Business people communicate in ways unheard of 20 years ago. Typewriters have been replaced by word processors. Electronic mail reaches its destination in a matter of seconds. Vernell Munson of Wang Laboratories explains.
You know, the exciting thing to remember is that the technologies allow us literally to communicate with the rest of the world, whether that be via satellite or connection to telephone lines, but it really offers us opportunities to get and act on information that we in the past were not able to have.
We see today when there won't be any paper anymore. All of the patient's records will be stored in computers. All of the patient's tests will be done by computers.
The day of the physical labor job, whether it's in industry, whether it's in business, whether it's home construction, filmmaking, whatever, the days of the physical requirements are going away. Technology is going to be entering all of these areas.
My advice to individuals who are looking for a career, recognizing the impact of technology, is to not be afraid of technology, but to embrace the technology merely as a tool, not to put the technology on a pedestal, but to think in terms of how to exploit that technology for creative purposes.
The technology of our age, the age of information, has produced the computer. Barely 40 years old, still changing and increasingly powerful, it has already become a measure of our ingenuity. Yet it requires that we ask ourselves, how will we use it? And for what purpose? The answer to these questions will be a measure of our wisdom. And as always, the answers rest in our hands, in all of our hands.